Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Stephen, and welcome back to the Take Care and Live podcast. Boy, am I excited that you decided to connect with us here on the podcast today. If you are streaming this episode on YouTube, or if you're watching on another platform or listening on another platform, welcome. So glad you made time for us today. Listen, are you a young leader who constantly feels they're getting sidelined for new opportunities? Are you a young leader who is experiencing barrier time and time again, not able to get access to the experiences that allow you to make the impact in that area or that business sector or that company or organization or that line of work where you know you can make a tremendous impact? Well, if you are, this episode is for you. And newsflash, if you are a seasoned or experienced leader, this episode is for you too, because there's some keys that you hold to help making these opportunities possible for the new generation of leaders coming our way. Listen, I want to encourage you that barriers and these barriers that exist, they are overcomable. You can overcome them, but there's some things that you need to be aware of. There are three things that make you an effective leader at any age. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the three leadership traits that matter more than age. And by the time you finish listening to this episode or watching it, you will have everything you need to know about whether or not you are ready to step into that level of influence you're hoping to have, or what you can do about it if you don't. There are wonderful passages in the Bible about leadership, tremendously impactful leadership stories. And one of them in particular stand out to me, and it's found in the book of 1 Kings 3:22 to 28. It's the story of a young leader, of a young king named Solomon. Now, Solomon, of course, as I just described, is a young man when he becomes king, and he succeeds his father, David, who was a king of Israel for 40 years. Now, David, in his own right, was a young man when he became king. He was around the age of 30. But his son, Solomon, was even younger. Solomon was reportedly 20 years old when he came in and took over the throne of a tremendous legacy of leadership that his father left for almost 40 years. And this young king, Solomon, being 20 when he became king of Israel, he, in his very early stages of leadership, encountered a conflict between two women who were, as described, women who were prostitutes, women of the night, as we used to say back in the day. And one of these women had awoken to find their child sleeping next to them to be lifeless. And when she woke up, she realized that she might have suffocated her baby to death by accident. How horrific that is. But upon further investigation, she actually realized that that baby was not hers, that the baby lying next to her had been switched and actually belonged to another woman. And so here we have these two women, these two individuals who have experienced a traumatic event. One having woken up to a baby that was not hers, and the other who woke up to a baby who was actually suffocated accidentally by her to death while they rested. So we have Solomon who has to encounter the experience of these two women. You could imagine the frustration, the anger, the anguish that these women are experiencing at the very moment. One overwhelmed with sadness about her child, the child she woke up to not being the child she put to bed to sleep before she went to take her own nap and get rest. And the other woman, traumatically saddened by the reality that it was unintentionally her fault that resulted in the loss of the life of her child. Two devastating situations. Yet Solomon was in a hard place because he needed to discern who was telling the truth. Now, these two women come before Solomon, and as they come to Solomon, it's their word against one another. It's her word against hers. And Solomon has only that information to go on. And knowing and seeing that he's not able to get the truth out of the individuals between these two ladies directly, he has to say, well, he makes a dramatic direction. He gives a dramatic order. And he says, this is what we'll do. Since I can't find out from either one of you who is the real mother of the living child, we'll cut the baby in half. And when he says this, one of the women says, yes, that's what we'll do. Go right ahead and do it. Cut the baby in half. That way, neither one of us will have a child. While the other woman says, no, hold up. Don't cut the baby in half. Give the living baby to her. And in that moment, Solomon has clarity about who the real mother is. Can you guess who it was? The mother who said, no, don't cut the baby in half. A horrific suggestion, by the way, but it was one used to draw out the truth from these two ladies. It was the response that gave Solomon the clue as to who the real mother was. The woman who was willing to give up her living child to the other woman who had accidentally lost her child so that not another life would be lost. You see, Solomon, when he became king, he didn't do what a lot of other kings did. He didn't go ask for wealth. He didn't pursue getting land and territory. He didn't want to make a big name for himself. That wasn't his goal. What his goal and what his prayer to God was that he would be a man of wisdom, that he would be a leader of wisdom who knew how to lead the people he was responsible for well. So here we have it. This man who made this prayer, who made this request, this desire to lead with wisdom, was able to put it to practice early on in his role as king. And it was that answer that he gave and the way he managed that conflict between these two women that allowed everyone else who he was leading to see that, wow, he was someone who was truly ready to take on the role, to carry the mantle, the weight of leading this great nation, the nation of Israel. You see, what we learn from this experience, what we learn about this conflict, what we learn about the response of this leader in the midst of this conflict is that leadership is very rarely about the issue of age. Leadership is often about the issue of being a competent leader who exercises wisdom. Leadership is often about being a person of wisdom. Now, Solomon's insightful decision between these two women, again, was an opportunity for God to show the other people who were following and were responsible for following Solomon's leadership that he was someone who was equipped with the skill to begin the work of leading this nation. Sure, Solomon didn't come in with all the answers to everything. I'm sure at 20 years old, there was plenty he needed to learn on the job. But what he did come into that space with was some core traits, some core competencies that demonstrated that he could be trusted with navigating the tricky, difficult, sometimes ambiguous challenges of leading people. One who was wise, one who could be and make thoughtful and critical decisions in the midst of a conflict. Those are essential skills that he needed to demonstrate. Those are essential skills that a king should be able to demonstrate. And quite frankly, any one of us today leading any organization or group, having any level of influence where it could impact not just ourselves, but others. So now let's talk about wisdom. What is wisdom? I'm going to give you a definition for it. Wisdom is the ability to have information and to think critically about that information. It is also the ability to know how to apply that information in the right context, at the right time, with and for the benefit of the right people. I'll say that again. Wisdom is not only about having information, but wisdom is the ability to have the information, think critically about that information, and know how to apply it in the right context at the right time with and for the benefit of the right people. So wisdom is more than just getting details. It's about the ability to analyze those details, to gain understanding about the people involved in it, about the situation and the context, and then apply that understanding well, wisely, skillfully. So the first thing I want you and I to reflect on as we think about young leaders specifically, and as you think about yourself as a young leader and your capacity and readiness to lead and take on new leadership opportunities, is that leadership and leading at a young level has never been, and leading at a young age, has never been a new phenomenon. For centuries, we've had people step into leadership roles at very young ages. Some who stepped in ready to take on the challenge, and others who didn't. Many who weren't ready at the time, but had some core competencies, some core traits that would enable them to develop their effectiveness as they went on. You see, everyone is called to leadership at different points in time. Some step into leadership later in life. Some follow a more chronological or ordered path, moving into a smaller role, growing into more opportunity and influence and positional power, going through the ranks. And then there are others who bypass traditional pathways altogether and move directly into significantly influential positions of authority and influence. So here's a quick public announcement for me, but here's a quick public announcement from me to my more experienced leaders. We have never been in a time where young leadership around you, before you, or after you has been or will be a new idea. We've never been in a time when young leadership was a new idea. Here's the reality. What's changed is you, right? It's you and I. You've gotten older, and over time, you've added to the breadth of your experiences. You've had access to opportunities progressively. And as a result of those opportunities, you learn on the job, you learn through experience how to exercise some of the traits and competencies that in some ways you may have walked into the room with, but were strengthened and sharpened as a result of your experiences. So while you're no longer a young leader, you yourself have experienced some of what many young leaders experience today, the inability to access the opportunities because of the assumptions made about their age. But now, as a result of time having passed, it's easy to forget about your journey. You're watching new emerging leaders come up who are significantly younger than you. And oftentimes what happens is we see and experience a shift in the age and experience level of leadership and of leaders. Our implicit bias shows up. This unconscious, automatic response that affects how we perceive things, how we make decisions, how we act. And if we're not careful, and if you're not careful as an experienced leader, you can unintentionally minimize another person's value, minimize the younger leader's value based on assumptions. And that includes assumptions you make about their ability and readiness to lead because of their age. Remember, there was a time when people doubted you. There was a time that because of your age, because of your lack of experience, or the assumption that you didn't have what it took, that you were seen as someone who was not worthy of the opportunity. And because of that, you owe it to yourself and to the new generation of leaders coming up to call yourself out on it when those biases show up. Because those beliefs, They develop over time, and they can become unwritten rules about what qualifies someone to be an effective leader. And those unwritten rules can cause you to become a negative, disruptive force in someone else's life. And so, with that, you may be creating roadblocks with your words, with your actions, or simply your current position of power. And then there's a ripple effect. Your refusal to provide access to those young leaders then circumvents their ability to make the kind of impact to the generation of people in the context, in the community, in the company that they're supposed to make, because they need you to shift your thinking. So here's my no nonsense recommendation for you as an experienced leader. Step aside. If you can't find it in yourself to create the space for young leaders, to open the doors or advocate for their development, then stop talking and get out of their way. What I love about 1 Kings 3 is that Solomon's early experience in leadership in this moment of crisis shows us that what we should be looking for is not the person's age. What we should be focusing on rather than age are these three competencies, these three traits. So here they are. A leader who is a competent leader demonstrates the ability to be a discerning listener. So is the person able to listen well? Can they distinguish between what's being said and what's truly being communicated? Can they assess whether what's being communicated is the full truth, a partial truth, or an outright lie? Here's the second trait. An effective leader is able to be a thoughtful decision maker. What matters more than age is that the person can be a thoughtful decision maker. That means, does the person avoid acting in haste? Have you seen them take the time to listen to multiple perspectives before they make the decision? Do they understand the context, the audience, and the appropriate timing for action? Are they acting wisely? Are they taking the information, thinking critically about it, applying it correctly in the right moment for the right people? So number 2, are they thoughtful decision makers? And then 3, the third trait is that you are a stern prison guard, as I like to describe, of your implicit bias. Effective leaders, more than age, are stern prison guards of their implicit bias. That means the person is able to keep their personal perspective from being the major influence in their decision. They can look beyond the social status, identity, economic background, cultural heritage of the individual, and instead, they utilize the information, the details, the context, the core issue, so that they can then make the right action or take a righteous action for the people involved. So it's important to notice as well in this experience how King Solomon, a man who was a king of a nation, took the time to listen to the story of 2 women who were described as being prostitutes, 2 marginalized individuals, 2 women, 2 people who in many societies, and where in many societies, advocating for them might appear to be a waste of time or beneath the person who should be arbitrating their issue. King Solomon, who could have passed this over to someone else, instead took the responsibility to listen to these 2 women who have a history as a result of their positional role and profession they're very likely to be overlooked and taken for granted. He made it his business to listen to their issue, to figure out where the truth lied in the situation so they can render the most accurate and appropriate course of action based on his decision. He focused on justice, not social standing. Solomon focused on justice for the situation, not the individual's social standing, which reminds us that in many ways, quite frankly, justice should be blind. As followers of Jesus, to lead under godly influence means that we are people who make decisions in moments of potential injustice that are not driven by that individual status or past, but focus on whether or not how the situation that they're in now is a fair one, is something that is creating more injustice, an increased level of unfairness, and has the potential, based on the outcome, to set precedent that can either let people know what the right thing is to do or perpetuate poor choices, poor actions, and the wrong thing to do. A wise, discerning leader is committed to doing what is right for the individual who has been mistreated and who is essentially at risk of being further marginalized. And this doesn't mean that you ignore the difference between right and wrong. Clearly, Solomon was determined, right, to do what was right. He was determined to make sure he understood who was wrong in the situation and whom should have had the rights to the child because that child was really theirs. But his first instinct was not to judge, but to be discerning. His first instinct was to be discerning. And so again, the issue isn't someone's age. The issue is whether or not they can demonstrate the capacity to be wise. That is, be a discerning listener, a thoughtful decision maker, and someone who is able to really call out their own biases and manage their own implicit bias so that their preferences don't get in the way of making the correct, practical, and just decision. Great leaders are committed to ensuring that even the most overlooked people are treated with fairness and dignity. So here you have it. Those are the 3 traits you need to be an effective leader at any age. You are someone who is committed to being a discerning listener, a person who is able to listen well, can distinguish between what is said and what's truly being communicated, and can assess where the truth, partial truth, or an outright lie might be at play and could influence the outcome. You are a thoughtful decision maker, someone who is able to avoid acting in haste, can listen to multiple perspectives, understand the context and the audience, and the appropriate timing for action. And you're a stern prison guard of your own implicit bias. You don't allow your own personal experience or assumptions about a person or community based on the history of your personal experience of what you observed to get in the way of helping you to make the just decision, the right decision for all involved. So here's some reflection questions. I want to leave you with some reflection questions to consider. For my experienced leaders, I want to start with you. Are there young leaders you've been unintentionally gatekeeping opportunities and limiting their growth and their access to leadership? How can you step in to support that young leader who needs you to remove barriers from the experience and from experiences that they need to refine those traits we just talked about? So think about that. And given what I shared about these traits, Looking at the landscape of young leaders you have access to, my call of action to you is to make a list of them and start to map out how you can begin to unleash increased opportunities for influence for them, to refine those skills and the potential of those skills, of those traits, of those competencies that I've just talked about. Now, here's for my young leaders. I want you to ask yourself, can you positively say that you possess these three important traits we just talked about? Being a discerning leader, being a thoughtful decision maker, and being a stern prison guard of your own implicit bias, considering all the details for each I just named. Is that a reflection of who you are? And if you believe that you actively demonstrate these traits, I want you to ask yourself and think about this. Who can vouch for you that you, in fact, do reflect these traits? Who can give you specific examples? Who in your circle can give you specific examples that you reflect being that discerning listener, that thoughtful decision maker, and that someone who practices managing their own implicit bias? And lastly, I'm going to encourage you to think about if there's room for you to make improvements in these areas that could, in fact, be keeping you from gaining access to the leadership influence and experience that you've been looking for, that have been the cause for you to be facing barrier after barrier and not getting access. Are you willing to seek out a mentor who's more experienced, who can help you cultivate those skills, those traits? That doesn't necessarily mean that the person is older in age than you, but they may be older in experience. Someone who can help you develop these competencies and hold you accountable when you're not practicing them and give you confirmation when you are. Because these people, those people who you give the opportunity to be a mentor to you in developing those skills and enhancing them, are the individuals who can serve as references for you down the line and be individuals who open additional access to you where you have previously experienced roadblocks. Okay? Listen, leading and having the right kind of influence is already hard. It's hard work, particularly when you're looking to do it for the benefit of others. It does take work, but it's even harder if people can't trust our words and our actions. And that requires courage and humility. So I hope this episode was helpful for you. I hope that as you think about those traits, as you think about these three traits that matter more at being an effective leader than age, that you will see where you land and how you can be an advocate for young leaders moving ahead if you're a more experienced leader. And if you are a new leader, a young leader, where it is you can further develop and how you can develop these skills even more so that as opportunities present themselves, you can take on the mantle of that influence and leadership in the area where you have a passion for and are looking to make the greatest impact. I want to invite you again to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button to the Take Care and Live podcast if you haven't already. And I'm also going to invite you to purchase my new book, The Momentum List. It's called The Momentum List. Rediscover how to delight in time rather than be mastered by it. I promise you that once you read it, you will walk away with the strategies and the resources that will help you to reprioritize what matters to you most so that you can then give yourself more effectively to all the other demands that often are part of living everyday life. You don't want to miss out on this short but really useful book. It's available wherever books are sold. There's hard copy, paperback, as well as a digital version of the book. And finally, I'm going to invite you to visit the Take Care and Live website. You can visit me at takecareandlive.com, or you can visit me at stephenvpeters.com. It'll lead you to the site and you can sign up for exclusive details. Join the mailing list because there'll be exclusive events and resources that I'll be sharing in coming days that you don't want to miss, that will help you develop the momentum in your life that you need and that other people can benefit from, because you've discovered and rediscovered how to reset the stage for you to be the most effective person you possibly can in your personal and in your professional life. And in the meantime, until we meet again, I encourage you to do what I encourage everyone to do, and that's to take care and live.